Hello, fellow Diet Dropout fans. I am here with one of my good friends from the Light Cellar in Calgary, and he is an amazing expert on superfoods, on eating things that make your body feel amazing. And the Light Cellar is a store that has classes. They sell all kinds of amazing foods that energize and heal your body. And so today I'm going to be talking to Malcolm about some principles of intuitive eating. Probably about 4 years ago, Malcolm was my first kind of foray into superfoods and not just, I guess, choosing foods because they make you feel good instead of just choosing them because you think you should, or because it's what you've always eaten, or because it's what you're craving, even though it's not good for you. So welcome, Malcolm.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Charmaine.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So my first question, if you could just kind of break it down, a lot of people I know haven't even heard of the idea of intuitive eating. So how would you kind of most easily explain intuitive eating?
All right. In one sentence, following your gut more than nutrition trends.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And so, and even if we back up, even before we get into intuitive eating, I like to kind of speak about this idea, this base of intelligent eating. And of course, intuitive eating is incorporated in that because our intuition is just one form of our intelligence. In our culture, our society, we've been raised in a way and we place so much high importance, and rightly so. I'm not trying to say one intelligence is better than another, but we have two types of intelligence. We have our rational mind, our reason, our intellect, and that's very wonderful. It's powerful. It's what got us on this call today with our technology, and there's so much great benefits around it. However, that's the dominant thinking that's in our culture and society, and that's what we kind of highly praise the most. However, we have this other side of ourselves, the intuitive sense, this feeling, this inner knowing, and we all have it. It's not very well recognized in our culture, and it's not very well cultivated as it might have been in the past or within other cultures around the world. And we've all had that sense, that feeling, right? I mean, it's like you go into someone's home and it's like, it feels good. Or you go into a restaurant, maybe we should eat somewhere else. You get those kind of like off vibes. And especially when it comes to food and nutrition, there's a time and a place for our reason, for our intellect, again, our scientific understanding, that's wonderful. But really the place of our self-nourishment comes from that sense of feeling, that gut feeling, right? Because it is all about our gut and our bodies. And now you might be thinking, well, that's very fine. I mean, what about if I get that, that feeling for a donut, right? When one could argue of like, well, if I just followed my gut and ate whatever I wanted, that's what got me in the mess in the first place. Mm-hmm. So we need a base of what I call intelligent eating to lead to a space of intuitive eating. And so I've developed an acronym called a food scope. And imagine this is like a lens, something that you can look at a food and know whether it's right for you. And of course, the goal is not to make it such an overly complicated intellectual process, which is, so we can have more fun and freedom with our food. Because I spent a number of years, I first got into health and nutrition, like most people, when things don't go so well, right? I was 16 at the time. It was a day like any other. I came home, found Mom in the kitchen, and I said, Mom, I'm going to become a vegetarian. And, she just looked at me and she was like, well, that's nice. But you're still going to eat this supper, aren't you? And, she was preparing. Has a Scottish background, preparing meat and potatoes. That was the standard fare that we had. And, plenty of junk food, not health food. It took me years until I got into that. So just jumped in, head first as a vegetarian, and literally went overnight from meat and potatoes to just potatoes. And of course, lots of junk food. Didn't go so well, right? Yeah. And why I'd, chosen this path had actually at that time nothing to do with food and nutrition. It was, I read some books, and today you can see some documentaries of this idea that if we eat more plants, if we be vegetarian, we can help save the planet. It's more animal friendly. It's healthier. And I really bought into that. And I went deep and just dove right into that, reading all the books. And for a number of years, probably 12 years or more, I was a vegetarian. I kept going down that rabbit hole. And ever since day one, I never felt good. And, admittedly, for sure, at the beginning, it was because I wasn't eating properly at all. And I changed my diet too dramatically. And to say I was a vegetarian is not quite accurate. I think it was more of a carbitarian. I was eating one sugar source after another, be that breads, cookies, pastas, chocolate, whatever it was, just to get enough energy to make it through my day. And I barely ate vegetables. So to call myself a vegetarian at that time, but that's what spurred it on, because I didn't feel good. I didn't have enough energy, and got into this idea of whole foods. Many of us who begin to explore nutrition, that's a place where we start, right? And you hear this idea of, if I make it myself, make it from scratch, there's less preservatives, it's more wholesome, that's healthier. So again, you'll notice I have a bit of a really all in kind of personality. So say, okay, well, that's the way to go. If that's the way to do it, for literally a number of years, I didn't eat anything that I didn't personally make or someone I knew had made from scratch. Nothing out of a box, nothing out of a package. Okay, I admit I still ate candy bars, chocolate every once in a while, but I didn't know you could do that in a healthy whole food version like I do now.
Yeah.
And I had no formal training. Up at the time, I knew how to make Pop-Tarts and grilled cheese sandwiches for myself. I knew, obviously, I could pour myself a bowl of cereal, which is honestly one of my preferences of any meal of the day. Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, that kind of thing. So if you can imagine, with those skills and level and knowledge of nutrition, that's how I started. And it did, but it was a journey, lots of learning, diving into whole foods. I remember I had a roommate in college who, some great advice. He's like, he took me to the grocery store. He's like, all right, Malcolm, you got to stick to the perimeter, right? It's all around the edge. Like, that's where the whole foods are. Anything in the middle aisles, that's all your packaged food, processed food, most of it corn, soy, wheat, these types of things. And so ventured very deeply into that world of whole foods. And kept kind of, trying to get healthy, trying to okay, if I just, do this, if I just add in another food, I'm missing this nutrient, I gotta do this, that. But the whole time, despite how much kind of mounting evidence I would read, or documentaries, or I'd go to other vegetarian communities, and I'd be working in retreat centers. And no matter how much that was getting solidified on an intellectual level, this is the way to go. You're going to be healthier when you become, take it this much farther, getting into raw foods, being a vegan, all that intellectual knowledge is out there to support that, theoretically. But on the inside, internally, I wasn't feeling that energy. I wasn't, and I knew something was quite wrong. And I kept making up stories of if I just keep doing it this way, that way. But I mean, you get 10 years down this rabbit hole and you're still not feeling well. And you've taken it to the 10th, as far as you can. And don't get me wrong, I got a lot of benefits, definitely moved very far with my health and food and nutrition, but there was still something that seemed to be missing, right? As I looked in the mirror, and if I was really honest with myself, I wasn't having that level of energy and clarity and immunity as well that I needed and wanted. But I was just so dogmatic, right? In kind of my thinking and my ways.
Yeah.
This healthy eating, whole foods eating, vegetarian, vegan, raw foods, but the body will win.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving great examples of how that intuition began to speak. I mean, it would come through dreams. I remember even, people that I was following in that movement, one person might have a shift, they were on that similar path. They started to open themselves up, eating animal foods, changing their diet, changing their mindset. And I'd be listening to their podcast and going just that voice listen, pay attention. Maybe you want to follow this. So one day I actually put aside everything. I was like, all right, I'm going to put all my ideologies and dogma. And if I really, I'm so, solid in my beliefs, then I should be able to experience this, and that will give me the answer. Right. So I remember we went out for sushi, and I had just a couple of pieces of salmon sashimi, just straight up wild salmon, no rice, nothing. And it literally dissolved into my body. I just felt so good. I mean, I left the sushi place feeling like I could swim upstream. And no word of a lie, literally we're walking out the door and I was like, I want more. And I was like, can I really just turn around and go back in and just eat the same meal? We didn't. We actually ended up driving down the street and went into a different sushi place, had some more, and
Wow.
just followed those feelings of my body. And it wasn't that I'd found, a bad diet. I was actually eating better than I'd ever had. I was just missing certain key nutrients.
Mm.
So in a foundation of intuitive eating is intelligent eating. So we can reference science. And this is the beginning of the acronym of the scope, right? A food scope, like a microscope, like a telescope. When looking at a food, sure, we can get a lot of benefit from science. Science is able to break it down and tell us, what is in a food? What are those chemical constituents? What are those compounds, those vitamins, those minerals that are really having an effect and making us healthy or making us sick? And so it's what's in a food, and then what are its benefits, or this idea of like the long-term studies of, how does it affect us, in the short term or the long run? And science can be very useful in offering that type of insight. Next is, maybe I'll go through kind of the positives of each of those, and then there's also this flip side, because like I was too intellectually caught in the science, which a lot of science can be manipulated, especially not necessarily in the studies, but maybe in how it's presented. We often hear just like the headlines, the snippets, it might just be a correlation, not a causation of what is being reviewed. So when I was getting deep into this kind of science of vegetarian, what I realized, it was kind of like a half truth. It wasn't the whole truth. It was half the picture. So absolutely, when you consume animal foods from an animal that hasn't been treated well, hasn't been raised well, isn't eating its right diet, isn't living in its natural environment, it's not going to be doing so well, right? A lot of people don't know that the biggest consumer of antibiotics in North America, in the world probably, is the livestock industry. And that's because they're being raised in conditions where they become very unhealthy. The conditions are unhealthy. So how can we expect, if we eat that kind of food, to really nourish our body and become healthy ourselves? Just, that exists, and that was one of my reasons for being vegetarian. But what I totally forgot about and wasn't paying attention to was, wow, on the other side, you can have small, local, like organic, beautifully cared for, beautifully raised animal foods that are actually very healthy, like dairy milk from a cow that's fed grains, that's pasteurized, homogenized, high omega-6 as a result, like very different experience than a cow, on the pasture, high in omega-3 because of that grass in its diet, that's raw. Ferment, different worlds, two different experiences. So when science, does a study, what kind of food are they analyzing, right? When you're hearing those studies, was that the milk from the cow in the factory farm, or was it the one out on the pasture? And you're going to have two very different results. So that's one way science, you got to look behind the curtain in that sense. And also, it does. It comes down to experience, really, which we'll get to. So science can be useful, can be wonderful. However, it's not the be-all, end-all. We need the other angles, views from the different lenses. So the next one is culture. So that's our C in the acronym of SCOPE. So S for science, C for culture. Culture can be very beneficial in terms of looking to the past and how did our ancestors eat, right? A friend of mine, Dr. Terry Willard, been a herbalist practitioner for over 40 years, and one of his best advices for people, like myself, that would kind of go down these these diet rabbit holes, and you try all these things, and eventually you come out the end of it just going like, I'm confused, I don't know what to eat. His best advice is go back to what your ancestors ate. Right? There was a traditional ancestral diet that they thrived on, and allowed them to be healthy through those generations, to successfully reproduce, raise their children, support themselves. Again, of course, it's not, I'm not painting it like this picture perfect idyllic thing, but it's a good place to start. And we know, and there's lots of science and studies saying, different genetics maybe have different predispositions to certain foods. And I think a lot of that comes from our bodies adapting to it. And of course, a lot of traditional heritage type diets, they ate from the landscape. They ate that kind of ideal diet that a lot of us are trying to go back to, the locally sourced, the well-raised, etc. So culture can be a good place to kind of And there's a lot of wisdom within culture. Again, wisdom that has developed over hundreds, maybe thousands of years on how best to prepare foods. And a lot of this comes through like our folklore or what grandmother might have said in the kitchen, right? There's definite wisdom there. And I think a lot of that has come through intuitively, as well as through science and, practical experience. There's been so much that that has elevated that level of wisdom, and we really do well to pay attention to that and look at what our ancestors ate and how they navigated the world of food and nutrition. Techniques as well. However, the one side of culture that we do need to be aware of is sometimes it's purely arbitrary. Sometimes there are biases, right? I remember a friend of mine telling me a story that he heard about, this family that prepares the turkey a certain way, right? The turkey's prepared and they got to cut off like one side and the other side, and this is how you prepare a turkey. And, the youngest daughter asked her mom, like, well, why do we do this? She's like, well, this is how grandma makes it. And so she goes and asks grandma, and it's like, well, grandma, why do you prepare it this way? She's like, well, this is how my mother made it. And it turns out if you went back to the great grandmother, well, that was just the size of her pan.
That's awesome.
It had nothing to do with, it was just a circumstance. So culture can be bound, obviously, by circumstance, and we're not living in the same circumstances that we are as we were even 100 years ago. We have different lifestyles, there's different levels of stress, there's different environments, and we're faced with different, opportunities as well as, threats within that. We have different access to food. So in some sense, it doesn't necessarily make sense to cut and paste, blank copy, let's just eat how my ancestors ate. And I think a great example is a lot of people are into, say, like paleo or Weston A. Price, and it's like, high protein, high fat, but yet they live a completely different lifestyle, right? It's like they're not nearly as active as these people that consume, like a true farm breakfast and then work their whole day. It's like, no, then I get in my car and I drive to my office and I sit there and drink my coffee and I, type on my computer, and then I go home and I watch TV. It's like if you're eating a diet like your ancestors, there's not quite a match for your lifestyle and your level of activity. The other thing is, cultural prejudices, right? Did you know once upon a time, something like lobster actually used to be considered like a lowly food? They would feed it to prisoners, for instance. Well, that was our cultural perspective at one time. Well, now it's this, this high food, right? This kind of gourmet thing, top of the list. Yeah. I've noticed a lot of traditional cultures, like say if I'm traveling, I'm down in South America, and oftentimes in North America, especially my world, me personally, as well as other people I know, we like to kind of revere, like the foods of the Amazon, or wherever it is. It's like these great, wonderful foods, and you go down there and it's like they're not eating it at all. Right. And there's a shift in their culture as they begin to modernize. They want to modernize to our culture, the Western culture. And so for them, the cultural high foods of the day are, Coca-Cola, corn chips, white bread, these types of things in the middle of the Amazon. I mean, I went on this tour and they served me like hot dog buns, and it was just like, and Coca-Cola, and it's like, but don't you have a traditional diet with all these wonderful foods? But for them, they see and they feel like it's a movement backwards, right? Mm-hmm. So they want to be progressive, they want to be modern, and unfortunately, our foods have also been associated with that. So in a lot of developing countries, culture, and I think that's more an example of how culture, if they'd really look back to their ancestors and went to that diet versus going to ours. So anyways, culture is valuable as it can be. There's also that kind of what you need to watch out for. Can't just take it wholesale. Next in the acronym is O, which would be opinions, right? Others' opinions, anecdotes, can be very valuable in helping decide what might be good for oneself. Charmaine, if you're just like, you're on this new thing, this new kick, I'm like, wow, like she's looking awesome. She's doing great. I love the energy she has. Like, I'm going to try what she's doing, right? That can be massively helpful in moving us forward. However, of course, it doesn't always work. What works for one person may not work for another. And so opinions, anecdotes, though we can get inspiration from others, we need to have it all come back to the last in the acronym, which is the P and the E, which is personal experience, right? So as much as whatever science can say about, algae, let's say spirulina, okay, it's full of protein, it's got over 65 different vitamins and minerals, it's got antioxidants, it's got these high in chlorophyll, there's blue pigment, it's just good for your immune system, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and culturally, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look in Africa, you look in South America, they've been consuming this for generations. Anecdotally, I watched this guy on YouTube and he was talking all about its benefits, and then I tried it and just like, oh, I made me ill. I didn't like the flavor, whatever it is, personal experience. Does it work for you? Do you enjoy it? And that's really where that intuitive piece comes from. And again, my biggest conflict, was that vegetarian, where I really saw that, where the rubber hits the road. You can have all the thinking, all the reasoning, all the intellectualism around it, but really it comes down to, what do you feel like eating, right? Like that's what feels best. You go out for dinner, it's like you ask your sweetheart, it's like, what do you feel like eating? If you're stressed out, it might be like, well, I think I should have the salad, or I think I got to keep to this program, versus no, yeah, I'm feeling like a little bit of wine, I'm feeling like the steak, that'll feel best for me.
Yeah.
So I know
that's great. That's awesome. So I think what I wanted to ask you next was, I'm really passionate about the freedom around food now and eating what your body wants and enjoying it. And so a lot of people, I guess one of the biggest things I hear from my clients is, well, it's not always possible. We have to meal prep in advance and we have to make sure our kids like what we're cooking. So what if it's not always possible to eat exactly what your body wants in the moment?
Yeah, for sure. There's, I'm a big fan of this 80-20, in that sense. So sometimes 20%, like circumstance just is part of it. And so what do you do in those 20%, right? You're going to, the family's, the in-laws' house for dinner, right? And it's like, this is not what I usually eat, or certainly not what I feel like eating. Are you going to be a jerk? I mean, I used to be. I was that person. I was like, I brought my salad, that's
yeah.
So, how can you look beyond food, I guess, in that sense? And I think oftentimes we can get into that, at least I did, of, okay, everything I eat has to be, the top, highest quality, like healthy, it fit exactly with my program, and took food out of that context of, well, there's this community and there's connecting and there's appreciation, and food is one way to do that, and it's okay, 80% of the time I'm kind of on my path doing my thing, and tonight I'm just enjoying with family or friends, and this is the food that's available. We can obviously modify how much we eat in that sense as well. It's like, partake, enjoy, but you may not, don't overstuff yourself. There's no point in that sense. So I think then it becomes a real set shift to help navigate that.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Just kind of knowing it's not always going to be exactly what your body might want and thrive on, but that it's okay. I know there's a lot of research on the stress around food, and if you're actually feeling guilty and shameful and stressful and stressed while you're eating, it's like almost worse for you than any amount of hot dog buns and junk food. So then the other thing was, any tips for getting in touch with your intuition? Because I think you've alluded to it, our fast-paced culture. I know for me, it's taken 4 years of meditating and slowing myself down. I'm super type A, go person. And now, at 33, I want to slow down and I love food and I'm savoring it, but this has been a journey for me. So do you have any tips for tapping into the intuition and slowing down?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you've shared already. And I think that's a big key is actually, intuition is, it's happening regardless all the time. And we're getting those signals, those cues, and it's just a matter of tuning into them. And, the ways that we learn about our intuition and to know, what's the voice, what's that right path to take, is sometimes we take the wrong path, right? Or sometimes even like you're saying, you can't always eat that thing you feel. Well, how did that make you feel at the end of the result, right? It's like, well, yeah, you sat down and you ate the pizza with the, and the soda and this and that, because that's what was being offered. Let that be an experience so you can really feel in your body. Of course, as you say, I love how you mentioned that, take it in as wonderfully and beautifully as you can, because that itself is really foundational, versus kind of that judgment. Oh my gosh, I'm shoving this down and it's going to make me ill. We never want to do that, right? In that sense. So it's really paying attention to one's body, eating mindfully. I love what you said about slowing down. And she says, how we eat is often a big reflection of our life, how we approach food. Are we quick and hurried and thinking about other things and on to the next? And I mean, if you think about it, food is such a delicious way, an inviting way to actually, slow down and take the time to prepare good food, or even if you're buying that good food, just to really, truly appreciate it, savor it, enjoy it. And I think that's one of the best beginning places. I often give the example of, a lot of us will get those cravings, right? It's like, and it's often, foods we think we shouldn't eat, right? Like the donut or the candy bar or whatever it is. And I know for me, it was like, okay, I really want a cookie. I just need some sugar, need some energy. And I'd eat it really quickly. Mm-hmm. And then later on, you kind of like, you don't want to feel the feels of, that experience. But if I'd actually just been okay with like, all right, okay, I'm gonna eat it. I'm feeling it. I'm recognizing the energy I'm in. I'm just gonna go for it. And I would slow down instead of just trying to eat it as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. Maybe I might stop myself halfway through, or maybe I might be going, this is all good. I'm eating it mindfully. I'm enjoying it. No problems here. There's no need to stress about this. Or I could be eating it and going, oh yeah, that's why I don't eat this. If we feel the feels of it afterwards, you could have that sensation of, every time I do that, I get this anxiety, and we don't stop and slow down to really feel the effects of, our body and our the kind of the repercussions of our eating. In our body, it speaks to us all the time. So I think a big part of it, intuition, especially when it comes to food nutrition and the effects of it, is learning the language of the body. So how does the body speak? Well, it speaks to us all the time and in many different ways. And it's through the senses. So we've talked a lot about feeling. That's one big doorway into the world of how your body communicates. How did it make you feel? Good, bad, etc. Tummy ache. But all the rest of our senses, like smell, taste. One of the tricks, though, is that, marketers, food manufacturers have really taken advantage of that. So they've amplified the color. They've exaggerated the flavor. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, if someone's like I was on just standard American diet, like junk food, candy, that kind of thing, to intuitively eat is just like, just if it tastes good, go for it, right? If it looks good, go for it. Well, you got to start from a base of what I call natural foods, right? Things that are more in nature, without those chemicals, without those preservatives. We got to move as close as we can to a natural diet, and then eat those mindfully. And then your body will be able to interpret the natural chemicals, which turn into signals and cues that your body will be able to respond to a lot easier, because it's coming in a more natural way, right? It's not exaggerated amounts of sugar or, red dye that begins to, mess with your brain. So from a space of natural foods, those cues, those signals, right? It's like, oh, I'm thirsty again, or hungry. Those are just the most obvious ways that your body communicates, but it does also in more subtle ways, and it's just body awareness. And of course, the deeper down of that is someone who's maybe a medical practitioner who's trained into how to read the language of the body, right? It's like you go in, I got these symptoms, these signs are showing up. They've just developed their ability to read your body in such a way. It's like, okay, well, the backs of your arms, you got some little bumps here, could be this. And I'm a big fan of self-diagnosis. Obviously, there's always a time and a place to visit a practitioner, but if we can develop body awareness, that we can have, even as obvious, I was like, there's bags under my eyes, right? It's like, that's a sign. So what does that mean, right? It's like, oh, maybe my salt level's off. Maybe my adrenals are getting maxed out, tired. There's these little like cues that we can read up on. And my friend Yarrow Willard, who's a second generation herbalist, great guy, and he's learned a lot of these body mapping systems. And he says, it takes 3 S's. So for instance, if you've got, the bags under the eyes, so that's one indication. Well, that could be for a number of reasons. Oh, but my lower back is kind of sore. Okay. So that also indicates adrenals. You can do, things like reflexology of your hands or your feet. It's like, that point where my adrenals are is actually really sore. Okay. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Now I've got enough kind of cues and signals that that's the path I'm going to take. Plus 2, probably the first thing you might even be thinking about adrenals is it just pops up right in your head. It's like, or someone says something and you hear that, it sticks out. That's your intuition. You're reading an article and it just kind of comes across, or it's in this book that you were just given. A lot of my kind of, pathways down this, food nutrition, how to self-heal, nurture myself have often come in that way. It might just be a thought and then it's affirmed. Like I mentioned, I was listening to podcasts. I was like, wow, everyone's talking about how they're not a vegetarian anymore. How did that happen? Right? Yeah. Those messages started coming through.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk all day. This is some really fascinating topics. And for me, it took me having to go to naturopath and get tested because I just wasn't tapping into my intuition. And I think there's a place for that, like you said, but yeah, if you're, gassy and farting an hour after you eat, then you probably ate something that's not, serving you. And like you said, the bags under the eyes, if you feel like you want to go have a big nap after you eat, then yeah, I think it's just tapping into that can be a lot more useful than, I guess, always striving for the solution from someone else outside yourself. And also, I think as we get older and our hormones change, something that I could eat before now it doesn't do well for me. So it's always changing. But I think this is an awesome place to kind of segue into you telling us where we can find you, because I know I have taken your chocolate making classes at your store and they're life-changing. And to eat one small piece of real dark chocolate is so much more enjoyable for me now than to eat like 5 Snickers bars, because I can just taste the quality and the love that goes into it. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit more about the store, the classes. You've got an awesome free e-course that you're offering.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my missions in the Light Cellar is born out of this, is to help you find and learn how to craft your own food and medicine. So just like we're talking about this personal individual journey of exploring the world of food and nutrition, coming to that space of more fun, more freedom, and intuition in our relationship with food. A big part of that is bringing the food skills back into your home and developing those crafts. Just this is like we can see in the marketplace, as my friend likes to say, we're moving from Wall Street to Main Street. Thank God we're moving from, big industrial, like commercial food producers, packers, etc., back to that small, local scale. And I love the availability that's now out there. And a big part of that is then bringing that back, all these skills that we used to do as humans, preparing our own food. And, I'm not saying that we should or can or even will create 100% of our own food, but whatever percentage it is, for me, it's about, adding one, and I met someone recently who literally, he's a bachelor, and for him, in his mind, it's like, it's easier, cheaper for him to go down the street to the pub and eat than it is to go to the grocery store, decide what he wants to buy, then he has to make it, then he has to clean up, and it costs him more, right, in that sense. But I think in general, we've kind of been living that lifestyle for the last several decades. And we're beginning to see the effects of that, and we're beginning to see the value of bringing the food back home. It's more nutritious, it's more fun, we can enjoy it, and the quality of it. So really big on teaching people the skills of how to, bring those crafts of whether it's fermenting or making your own elixirs, how to upgrade your own coffee, whatever it is. There's so many different aspects, and this idea of adding in superfoods where there's that nutrient density to really start nourishing ourselves. The Light Cellar was born out of a space where I had this idea of what I wanted to eat, and knew that there was a lot more diversity out there than I was being offered in the regular supermarket. Mm-hmm. And of course, you've seen the growth and the movement of farmers markets. That's awesome for our like kind of local produce and our meats and everything. That's great. And kind of what I offer is, what I like to call like the exotics and the erotics, you know, like foods from all around the world. And again, culturally that have been revered throughout time, that have been those great foods and medicines that humans have utilized, and just showing techniques of how you can bring that in. So that's the Light Cellar. You can find us at thelightcellar.ca. We have a free video e-course that anyone watching can check out. Just go to superfoodsecourse.com, and it's, I believe it's 10-part video e-course. We just break it down, like what are superfoods? What are the different categories? And most importantly, how can you begin adding them in? My approach to food nutrition now, and what I suggest for others is this idea of adding in grading, right? So you add in a new food that, like spirulina we talked about, you know, you hear about it, oh, maybe there's some benefits there for me, you know, add it in. Just keep doing what you're doing, but start adding in these new, different, unique foods. And then, of course, always upgrading the quality. So we talked about, you know, cow milk in those two different worlds. Well, if you're over here and you're buying, you know, conventional cow milk, switch over here, look for a more local organic brand. That's an upgrade. Chocolate, you know, another great one. No, I love that. I'm not saying don't get rid of your chocolate. I'm just saying, you know, upgrade the quality. Learn how to create it yourself. It's so much fun. And a good way to, again, like the whole theme of today is how can we get more in touch with ourselves and our food? And that's one delicious way to do it.
Okay, well, awesome. And I think if you want to, yeah, your body always wants wholesome foods, real food, foods that comes from Mother Nature as close as possible. So you can't really go wrong with that. And I know, I love what you said about adding, because I don't like the idea of deprivation or, you know, cutting all these things out. But once you start to add things that make you feel great, it's so much easier to let the other things go without feeling like you're forced to, or you should, or you're deprived. So I love that. So awesome. I'll post a link to the Superfood course below. And anyone watching, if you want to learn more about Malcolm and the Light Cellar, make sure to check out thelightcellar.ca, and we will talk to you soon. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I look forward to hearing any comments, questions you have for either myself or Malcolm.
All right, right on. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.